Welcome to Women in Literature. This PowerPoint is meant to set up the questions that we're going to be exploring together this semester, giving you background to the reading and the way that we will be exploring it. So what does the term women in literature mean? Does it mean literature by women? Does it mean literature about women? Does it mean literature for women? Or is it any combination? And we will actually be reading stories that fit into some of these categories, but not necessarily all of them. And sometimes it will be up to you to decide which category is appropriate. Now, of course, the work that we are doing has become richer because of the rise of the female author over the past 2 centuries. In the 18th, 19th century, writing was one of the few respectable ways for a woman to earn money. Women also were an important reading market. Some female authors wrote under male pseudonyms, including the Bronte sisters. So even though they became very successful and known as the Brontes, when they were first published, they preferred to be known, to have their work known as being by men. Some men write under female pseudonyms to appeal to their audience. Nathaniel Hawthorne complained in a letter to that damned mob of scribbling women. 19th century female authors were so popular that they were outselling men, and that basically was one of the first times that it became quite common for men to basically adopt a female pseudonym. But that still happens in the 21st century, where male crime fiction authors use female pseudonyms, since the large part of that market are female readers. However, though women have been successful in the marketplace, they have not necessarily achieved the same level of critical acclaim as male authors. Most literary critics, newspaper and academics were men, and that is still just starting to change when we're talking about major critics. While female authors sold better, work by male authors was more likely to achieve respect, which is why authors in the 19th century, George Eliot and George Sand, wrote under those names. Virginia Woolf suggested that female authors were limited in development of their writing by not having a room of their own. She argued that though some kind of writing was possible in the shared spaces that women had, she basically said that the reason that women couldn't achieve the same level of artistry was because of their responsibilities within the home. The other problem is what women write about. In the American tradition in particular, marriage is less a part of serious literature. So literature that deals with domestic or romantic issues is automatically seen as sentimental and less. Even today, male authors are more likely to earn top awards and recognition. In Virginia Woolf's famous essay, she was pointing to the fact that there were material limitations that got in the way for women to become authors, or at least to become authors at the same level of success. They were less likely to have access to the same level of education. They were less likely to be able to live independently or have an independent income. They were unable to get the jobs that men could get that would actually lead them into publication. They had to be concerned about their safety. Single women were basically seen as someone who could be taken advantage of. Most women had some responsibility for children and the household, so they had to manage that along with their writing. They also had to worry about the longevity. Women often died in childbirth, which is true of a woman we're going to be talking about, Mary Wollstonecraft, who wrote a very important essay about the potential of women and then died in childbirth. Her daughter, Mary Shelley, never got to know her. And then community. Male authors have supported male authors, and it's been harder for women to basically break into that club or to basically form a community of their own. To illustrate her point about the limitations on women that prevented there from being a female Shakespeare, Virginia Woolf imagined, what if William Shakespeare had had a sister named Judith? This young woman might have been equal in genius to her brother, but she would have had access to no education. She would have had no outlets outside of the household. So she wouldn't have been able to talk to people the way her brother would have been, expanding her knowledge of the world. She would have had her parental expectations that she would stay at home or in her husband's home. She would have been unable to travel to London. She would have been unable to attend theater without an escort. And if she would manage to get herself to London by herself, she would have been subject to sexual harassment, which might have ended up in an unwanted pregnancy, which could have led to death in childbirth. And so that basically is how Virginia Woolf imagines previous literary geniuses that never had the chance or the material conditions to write. On the other hand, J.K. Rowling, an author of the late 20th century, was able to overcome the disadvantages of her life. Joanne Rowling was a single mother on public assistance when she wrote her first Harry Potter novel. She chose a male protagonist, not only for Harry Potter series, but for her subsequent book series. She was interested in reaching the largest possible audience, and she believed that she could pull in female readers with her strong female characters, but felt that a male protagonist was needed for male readers to also come to her series. She is not only the richest author, but she is the richest woman in the UK. She is a female author, but how does her fiction serve female readers? And I'm sure that you have some very interesting questions about the books, as well as answers to that question about the value of J.K. Rowling in women in literature. On the other hand, women are not only responsible for portraying women's issues in literature. In fact, there is a long tradition of male authors who have created vibrant female characters that are multidimensional and that basically push against limitations that have placed on them. One author in the 19th century was Thomas Hardy, who wrote the novel Tess of the D'Urbervilles, among others, that really did look at the unfortunate circumstances that women found themselves trapped in. Henrik Ibsen is a playwright who's very famous for how his work questioned the limitations placed on women, particularly in his play Doll's House and in Hedda Gabler. I wanted to address a question directly. Is this a literature course or is this a secret feminist course? And I'd like to basically say that feminism is such a broad term and it has negative connotations for some people, but when you get right down to it, feminism is just about talking about gender roles and how do gender roles operate. So if you're saying, is it feminist, which feminism are you talking about? Does it make visible the presence, work, and experience of women? Does it give female authors the same opportunities and recognition in the marketplace? And one thing that you have to say about J.K. Rowling is that she's shown that women can exert an extreme amount of power over not only their writing, but also in terms of its production into film. Does the work highlight the restrictions of gender roles? Does it go farther and directly critique those restrictions, possibly by presenting new ones? Does it advocate for political change? And that last line is probably the most directly feminist. But again, not all things that we read are going to really fall into all of those categories. Women in literature is not feminist if it does none of those things, but it doesn't have to do all of them. First and foremost, it should be good literature. I thought I'd leave you with some questions that I hope you'll ask yourself over the course of the semester. With so many texts, how to choose what we read together. I have tried to make some choices following certain themes, but I really am open to what your interests are. And it's also one of the reasons why I'm leaving it open what you want to write on for your final project essay. How does historical context, when it was written, matter? And that is sometimes a question to ask. Should we only look at a text for when it was written, or can we also look at why this older text now connects with issues that it didn't connect with when it was written? And this is very clear when we look at Greek plays or even Shakespeare, where these texts mean something different performed now. Is literature by women different than literature by men? Sometimes, never. And that is really sincerely an open question that I have. Does a female author have to support women? And then there's the question, which women? Are bad female characters of interest? Reese Witherspoon played Becky Sharp in the film Vanity Fair, so you may have some familiarity with that character. And then there is, of course, Lady Macbeth. Does patriarchy only harm women? Can women be patriarchal? I hope that the things that we read together will allow you to answer some of these questions, or at least keep questioning. Overall, I hope that you will enjoy reading and sharing. I don't expect you to like everything that I give you to read, but I hope that will lead you to a better understanding of what you enjoy and why. Thank you so much, and I look forward to getting to know you this semester.